Hey guys, how is everybody doing? So, almost a month ago, the DCEU ended with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. This franchise gone on for 10 years, and last December we said goodbye to it with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. So, while saying goodbye to it, I'm going to give you my own personal ranking of all 16 DCEU movies, ranked from worst to best. And as always, this should always go without saying, but sometimes it never does. This is just my own personal ranking. These movies is how much I enjoy. These are the movies that I enjoy the most out of this universe. So let me know which ones were your favorite and least favorite of the universe. So again, this is just my opinion. One more thing before I begin. Sorry that this video is late. The Aquaman Lost Kingdom came out around Christmas. Christmas stuff was going on. I had other plans while making the Silent Night Deadly Night review series, and the first week of January, I was getting my end of the year rankings all done and over with, and then I decided to take a little break over the weekend so I can rest up and all that before I did this video. So please forgive me for being so late. Hopefully some of you understand I might be a little late to the party even doing this because almost every other channel got theirs out. So sorry that mine is late, but enough apologizing and all the bullshit. So here's my ranking. And at number 16, I don't think is really a surprise, is the worst of the franchise, and that is Justice League, aka the theatrical cut of Justice League. Now, for those of you who don't know the story, now, originally this movie was supposed to be fully directed by Zack Snyder, but there was creative differences behind the scenes. Warner Brothers saw the negative feedback with Batman v Superman, but they just didn't really listen to reviews. They just thought it was too dark and all that, so they tried to rush this movie into production. Zack Snyder said that he wanted to make his movie, but Warner Brothers just kept trying to rush him and do on all that, but sadly the tragedy with his family, so he had to walk away from the project. Then they got the director of the first two Avengers to reshoot basically this entire movie. Now, the person that directed this movie, kind of the more of the reshoots, was the director of the first two Avengers. And when you look at him and Zack Snyder, those are very different directors with very different creative ideas. So Zack Snyder and the guy who directed Avengers, putting those two together, they don't really fit well. Those two directors do not fit well. And then you get this really messy, stupid version of the Justice League to where it's very disappointing. Now, I will admit this. Back when this movie first came out, I said it was an okay Justice League movie, and it was an okay follow-up for Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, but yet I was still a little upset with this movie. Now, I will admit there's still some Zack Snyder scenes in here that were kept in, which I'm glad about, but now, I will also say this. This movie gets so much hate from so many people. People say that this is the worst comic book movie ever. Some people say this is one of the worst movies ever made. Am I in that group of people? God, no. I do not think this is one of the worst movies ever made, but I still don't really like the movie because it's just disrespectful to Zack Snyder, and I really don't like the final outcome. This movie is also too goofy for a Justice League movie, too. Look, I don't hate the movie, but it's still just not a good Justice League movie. And at number 15, now from here on out, these movies I could see myself rewatching. There's like a huge gap between 16 and 15. So number 15 is going to be Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Now, I don't hate this movie. Again, there's a big gap between 16 and 15. Now, I think this movie is an okay superhero movie. Now, I had not seen the first Shazam until this movie came out, and I'll talk about the Shazam movie. You'll see that very high up on this list. And for this being a sequel to Shazam, I think it's an okay follow-up. It's an okay superhero movie. The only reason it's really this low, it's just because it's just a generic superhero movie. The villains are nothing to really write home about them. This movie was just guaranteed to flop, and all the marketing just showed up as like, oh, our movie's gonna flop? Oh, that's not good. Let's bring in Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman again. That'll get some butts in the seats. They bring her in, they don't really do anything with her. I don't really think the family dynamic in this movie is as good as it was in the first movie, which is kind of upsetting. But it's still an enjoyable movie enough. It was my least favorite comic book movie of last year. It's just an okay superhero movie. And number 14 is going to be Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the final DCEU movie. And that's probably the only way this movie is actually going to be remembered. Now, I'll talk about the first Aquaman, but when I get to that, the only thing I'll say right now is I don't think that movie's all that great. But I don't think this movie is any really that good. To me, this movie it had the writing on the wall that it was gonna be a bad movie. After rewrite, after reshoot, after delay, behind the scenes drama, the Warner Brothers coming out and saying that the DCEU is gonna be ending and that they're gonna be doing a full reboot, and bringing James Gunn to do the full reboot and all that. To me, this movie just had the writing on the wall that it was going to be bad. But however, some trailers did sell me. But this movie is just not for me because the movie is way too goofy for me. I just don't really care for it. But I am glad that James Wan did come back to direct. He does know how to direct a movie. The action sequences were good, but Black Manta was kind of wasted again, which I'm kind of hating that they did with him in this franchise because I like the actor and I really like how he portrays him. He's an interesting villain, but they kind of waste him, and this movie is just way too goofy for me. But I am glad that Amber Heard is barely in the movie because of all the drama. And, for this is probably going to be the only movie in this franchise that's just going to be, oh, Aquaman Lost Kingdom? You mean the movie that ended the DCEU? Oh yeah, that movie. That's the only way this movie is going to be remembered. Is just it ended the DCEU. The only other thing I can think of that I really liked is the Patrick Wilson and Jason Momoa scenes because those were the only things that I really saw myself caring for during this entire movie. And number 13 might actually kind of get me in trouble that this movie is actually not lower on my list, and that is David Ayer's Suicide Squad, the first Suicide Squad movie, the 2016 one. Now, I understand why this movie does get a lot of hate. I do agree with some of the criticisms, mainly Jared Leto as Joker, but however, I do kind of wish we got to see him more. Maybe that's the only reason I don't care for him much is because we barely got to see him. And if you did see the news when this movie was first coming out that Jared Leto only a lot of Jared Leto's scenes as Joker did cut out, and what they did keep of him, I just didn't like of him. I do like Jared Leto as an actor. All in all, he has kind of made bad choices with his acting roles, but I think he could have been a great Joker, but the way that they just handle him isn't great. But the reason that this movie is so high up on my list is because this movie gives me what I come for from the Suicide Squad, a great group dynamic, some pretty good action, and some funny comic relief. And I do think some of the casting in this movie is really good. Mainly, of course, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, because that is one of the greatest castings of all time, and I love Margot Robbie, and she's perfect in this role. I think she's probably most likely actually she is in the conversation as best comic book castings with up there with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, Ryan Reynolds' as Deadpool, Wesley Snipes' as Blade, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. She is up there with the perfect castings for comic book movies. There is no doubt in my mind about that. But this movie is messy. You can definitely tell that this movie is a victim of a production company and that David Ayer has said that he wants to release his version of the Suicide Squad on like how Zack Snyder did with Justice League. Now, I won't completely shit on that idea because a lot of people were really hoping for Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, and a lot of people were downers like, we're never gonna get it. And surprisingly, we got his cut of the movie. So unless James Gunn lets David Ayer release his version of the Suicide Squad, I guarantee you I will prefer it over this movie. But for it being a Suicide Squad movie and seeing the group of characters kind of trying to take down the villain, some funny group dynamic, I think it's a fun movie. But the villains, I think, are probably the worst villains of the franchise in this movie. They're not interesting. There's like this weird like witch lady that just does this entire movie and says like weird spells, and the entire movie she's trying to get her brother back. I don't even remember the brother's name actually. All I remember is brother. That's all I remember. Villains are nothing to write home about, but this is just a fun comic book movie with pretty cool group dynamic. And at number 12 is going to be probably the weirdest movie on this list, and that is Black Adam, the one with The Rock. Now, I remember when this movie was actually first coming out. I had no interest in this movie whatsoever. I almost didn't even go watch the movie because the trailers just looked god awful to me. And I remember the marketing for this movie where Dwayne Johnson, he kept coming out And he's like, this is going to be the next step in the DCEU. This is going to be the greatest DCEU movie. This is going to set up everything that everybody wants. And like Dwayne Johnson is kind of talking about how he's going to be the showrunner of DCEU and how this movie is going to make the entire thing, the entire universe great and everything. And you kind of look at that and you go, you're Black Adam, dude. Like, you're not saving anybody. You are like a C tier, probably D tier character. You are a villain for Superman and Shazam to fight. This is a setup for Black Adam to fight Superman and Shazam. Excuse me. That is all this movie is. And like, this entire movie also, this entire marketing, so where Warner Brothers knew this movie was going to flop because they knew the movie wasn't good. And so they were kind of like giving a sense like, hey, we're bringing back Henry Cavill. We're going to make Man of Steel 2. Probably in a post-credit scene in this movie. I'm totally not spoiling it for you. And it's like, well, when you go into this movie and then you see that post-credit scene, you're like, oh, it's great. We're going to have Henry Cavill back. I'm so excited for that. And then, of course, after all the news with Henry Cavill, we never got that Man of Steel 2 or Black Adam versus Superman, which is unfortunate. Maybe this movie would be tiny bit higher on my list if we actually got our Man of Steel 2 and that post-credit scene actually went somewhere. Excuse me. I'd probably have it higher on my list because of all the setup that this movie did. But unfortunately, we just never got any of that, so that's why it's kind of lower on my list. But it's an okay superhero movie. That's the best I could say. And number 11 is going to be Wonder Woman 84. Now, excuse me, there's something wrong with my throat today, Jesus. Now, when this movie first came out, I loved the movie. Now, at one point, I even said this movie was better than the first Wonder Woman. Now, I'm kind of eating my words on that. The reason I mainly loved this movie back when it first came out, because this was the first movie, because this movie came out during COVID, and that's when the world was shut down. No, nothing was open. Everybody was scared to go outside. We had to do remote learning. Movie theaters were shut down. No movies were ever playing. They were not opening. Almost every movie that was planned to come out in 2020 went direct to streaming. But when this movie came out and I heard that I could finally go back out to the theaters on Christmas Day to watch a movie, I was so excited. And the fact that, maybe just the fact that I got to watch a superhero movie in the theaters during COVID when I hadn't got to see a movie in the theater for months, maybe just the feeling of it just got me excited again. Like, and when I watched it then, I loved it just because I finally got to see a movie in the theater again and I got to see a new movie finally. But when you watch it years later, and especially when you can just watch movies in the theaters again, and COVID has kind of died down a little bit, and it's kind of just like the flu now, the movie does really go down on my list. Now, I don't hate the movie. There's nothing really I hate about the movie. But just watching it years later, it's not that great. Especially when I rewatched it, it's like, there's like no Wonder Woman action in this movie, to where basically what this entire movie is a Wonder Woman love story, to where you get the guy from the first movie that died, who sacrificed himself to kind of get rid of all the poisonous gas, basically. And he gets to come back, and like this dude's like body, which is really weird, and no one really talks about that. That's basically the entire movie. It's just a love story, and oh, there's a few superhero scenes in here, and then you got a villain. That is the entire movie. And the main thing that really that kind of crushes this movie for me is Pedro Pascal. And I love Pedro Pascal. I don't really think his villain is very interesting. They don't really do much with him, which, if you mess up Pedro Pascal in your movie, then there's something seriously wrong with you, okay? That I don't know what you were doing or what the hell you were on, but if you mess up Pedro Pascal, then don't talk to me. But however, this movie is a fun Wonder Woman movie, and since it is the final Wonder Woman movie in this universe, they could have done worse, but especially after that awesome Wonder Woman movie and you're expecting so much from a sequel. And another thing about this movie too, this movie's supposed to be an 80s movie, like it's supposed to, as its title, 84, it doesn't feel like the 80s. It just feels like, oh, let's just make it like really bright and play a few classical songs here and there, and it's the 80s. I did not feel the 80s in this movie. Coming in at number 10 is going to be the first Aquaman. Now, I understand why so many people love this movie. I understand why this might be your favorite DCEU movie. I might understand why it's in your top 3. Who knows? It just does not work for me. Now, I will admit, I do like Aquaman in this movie. Jason Momoa as Aquaman is a great casting. I love him. And I do like Patrick Wilson as the villain. He's a great actor as well. Now, the Amber Heard and Jason Momoa chemistry, although I think Amber Heard is a horrible person and I hate her to this day, I do think there's some pretty good chemistry there. The action in this movie is pretty good. I do like the fight scenes between Black Manta and Aquaman. But however, this movie also has like this subplot about like Aquaman's mom being dead, but they don't really go anywhere with it, and it's like, okay, you don't have to keep reminding me, especially when you have never seen this movie before and you see the trailer for Aquaman the Lost Kingdom and you see her in the trailers a bit, and then when you watch this movie before going and you're like, "Mm, she's alive," and then when they show her that she's still alive, it's like, I'm not surprised, maybe because I've never seen this movie before. But this movie is still enjoyable enough, but this movie does also have some of that goofy humor that just doesn't work for me either. But I will admit, it does kind of balance it better in this movie than it did in the second movie. But the movie itself, it's just an okay movie for me. I don't love the movie, but I also just don't hate it. I think it's just a fine superhero action movie that I could probably put on to pass a few hours if I'm bored. That's the only reason I would ever watch this movie. I would probably really never watch this movie. But it's an enjoyable movie enough. And at number 9 was another first time watch for me, and that is Birds of Prey and long ass stupid fucking title Harley Quinn. Something like that. I don't know what the full title actually is. But anyways, Birds of Prey. Now, I did not expect to like this movie whatsoever. A solo movie with Harley Quinn does not, it doesn't really intrigue me much, but however, it is Margot Robbie in the lead role. Could be a fun movie. But Ewan McGregor as Black Mask, perfect casting, and I'm glad that they don't waste him in this movie. I mean, if you waste Ewan McGregor as the villain, you're seriously something wrong. I think he's great in the role. I really think he fits Black Mask to where I honestly kind of upset that they killed him at the end of this movie because I think that they didn't kill him at the end of this movie. There could have been a pretty cool setup here because I would have really liked to see a sequel to this movie because this movie had potential to have a sequel and I would have watched it. Margot Robbie is Harley Quinn. She steals the show as always as Harley Quinn because she's great and the action in this movie is pretty good. Is pretty cool. Now the other characters in this movie I didn't really care for too much, but I did think their dynamic in this movie was interesting, and I thought they were all pretty funny in this movie. Now, I will admit, does this movie need to be rated R? No, but I did think they made an interesting choice of making it rated R. They have a few F bombs in here. They make the movie pretty gory during the entire movie, which I thought was fun, especially the like really gory parts of the movie. I think was actually pretty well done, and it's an enjoyable Birds of Prey movie starring Harley Quinn in the lead role. It's a fun movie, and I do see myself rewatching this movie often because it's a fun Harley Quinn movie. And it's kind of a spin-off of a Suicide Squad movie, kind of. Another thing about this movie that I also like is kind of like a social commentary about a big breakup and like a girl going through like a mental breakdown of like a breakup, which pretty cool social commentary if you ask me. And at number 8 is going to be The Flash. Now, if I made this ranking back when the movie first came out, this was probably in like my top 5 or 3 or something like that. But, I talked about this movie ad nauseum with my end of the year rankings. This movie is an okay movie. I think it's an okay action movie with The Flash in the lead role. It's a fun little superhero movie that I could see myself rewatching. This movie does have a lot of issues. Mainly, the big one is the CGI. I don't think you've ever met anybody that hasn't said the CGI is bad. And then they kind of try to come out and be like, oh, it was meant to look like that. Your eyes are just stupid. Get the hell out of here with that shit. And the ending of this movie, like, kind of ruins it to where Barry kind of understands that he should have never had messed with the past. He should have never done anything. And then he kind of goes back and stops himself from doing it all over again. But he still messes with the past because at the end of this movie he moves up the tomato sauce or whatever to make his dad look up. He interfered with the past. He still did not learn his lesson. And some of the like Barry Allen stuff going on, I think the Flash in like the past, the Barry Allen from the past. I don't really like that version of Barry Allen because he's very annoying and I don't really like him much, but I do like the future um, Barry Allen. And I will admit this, all controversy aside with Ezra Miller, I do like seeing him in this movie. He's a great actor, and I do like his portrayal on The Flash. I think he's pretty cool. And of course, you got Michael Keaton coming back as Batman, which is a dream come true for almost every Batman fan that grew up with Michael Keaton's Batman. I love the guy, but I would have kind of preferred Batfleck in this movie because I think they only got Michael Keaton to come back just for nostalgic and to just get more money. He's like, hey, we got Michael Keaton to be our Batman. So how about you come watch our movie? And this movie was also supposed to be a setup for Batgirl too, I'm pretty sure, which we never got unfortunately. So maybe if we also got the Batgirl movie, I think this movie could have been higher on my list. From here on out, I think these are all great superhero movies. I think that some of these movies are even like top tier superhero movies in my opinion. So, coming in at number 7 is going to be Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Now, I will admit this, until I watched Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, this probably would have been lower on my list. But after watching his version of Justice League, it kind of actually got higher on my list because, thank you to Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, all the setup in this movie makes sense. Now, there are great things to like here. The main one I really like is how humanity is kind of against Superman. Like, there's like half of the world that really likes Superman and thinks he's a great guy, but on the other half of the world, people are kind of scared of Superman and don't know what to think about the guy. They don't trust him because he's an alien from space. A lot of people actually did not like that, and you kind of got to ask yourself, if an alien from space crashed down on our planet and did not know anything about our planet really, and then he has all these abilities and he can use them for evil, would you fully trust him? Because I know I wouldn't, and I don't understand why so many people hate that. And Ben Affleck as Batman. Now, I will admit, I did not like him at first, but over time I've kind of grown and be like, you know what? This guy's badass. I kind of like him. And that warehouse fight scene, probably top tier, best Batman scenes ever. I love that scene. That is one of the best Batman action sequences ever. And I do like Zack Snyder's cut on both of the characters. Now, I don't like how he has his Batman kill, but you never know. But I just don't like how his Batman kills. And I don't really like Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. Now, a lot of people have actually tried to tell people that it's like, oh, but he tried to make his version different, goofier, and mystique and all that. It's like, well, that's great. I don't like that. I don't like his take on it. Like, I'm glad he tried to do something different with it, but it's just not for me. This is just not my version of Lex Luthor that I like. I like a more like scarier and smart and knows how to outthink Superman more. Like that's the Lex Luthor I think of, but instead you just get like this weird, goofy Looney Tunes version of him. But this is a great movie, and also get the hell out of here with that Martha bullshit. Like, oh, your mom's name's Martha, I'll help you now. Like, get the shit out of here with that bullshit. But all in all, I do think this is a pretty good movie, and I do see myself rewatching this movie. But another thing this movie has going on with it is that it kind of has like a plot issue to where it doesn't know what the plot wants to be, because some of it is a Man of Steel 2, some of it is a standalone Batman movie, some of it is an origin story for Wonder Woman, and some of this is just like set up for Justice League. That is all one movie. It's like, what? Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this. I'm talking about the Ultimate Edition. We don't talk about the theatrical version of it because some of that shit makes no sense. Yes, Ultimate Edition is 3 hours, but it makes more fucking sense. Coming in at number 6 is gonna be Shazam, the first movie. Now, at first, I had like no interest in this movie, but thank you, since I decided to do this list, I actually watched for the first time, and I actually really enjoyed myself, because this movie is very emotional at times with its characters, like how the main character is trying to find his mother because he accidentally got lost, and then this entire movie is also trying to find his mom and all that, and then at the end it's actually pretty emotional. I like the character dynamic between the family. I think they're great in this movie, and there's also some pretty good comedic relief. I think there's actually some pretty good humorous parts in this. And I do think this movie does do a pretty good job with an underage kid showing him having the powers of Superman to where it's basically like, what if Superman was a 10-year-old kid, like a 13-year-old kid? And this movie does capture that to where a 13-year-old with the powers of Superman and what he's doing. I do like that, and I do like the brother dynamic with Barry and the other kid. Well, I can't remember his name, though. Was it Ted or something? I can't remember. But the main issue with this movie, and this is something I've said basically throughout this entire list, the villain for this movie is very generic. And this is a villain that I did not care for, and this is a villain that apparently was almost chosen to be in the next Shazam, but the guy said he was like unworthy and all that, and then he spent the rest of his life trying to find that place again. That is the villain. I've seen it before. But all in all, it's a fun comic book superhero movie, and it's kind of upsetting that the sequel wasn't as good as this movie. And number 5 is kind of confusing because there's also like theories that this movie is going to actually be part of the DCU. There's some things saying that this is actually going to stay part of the DCEU, but fuck it. Number 5 is going to be Blue Beetle. Now, this was a movie I did not have any interest in. This was a movie I did not think was going to be good whatsoever. None of the trailers sold me. Nothing. But thank the Lord I actually gave this movie a chance because this ended up being one of my favorite DCEU movies and one of my favorite comic book movies now because this movie was actually really fucking good because this was a movie I had no faith in, but thankfully this movie was so much better than I thought it was. I really love the family in this movie. Kind of the same thing with Shazam because I really like the family dynamic here. There's actually some pretty emotional times here to where a certain character dies in this movie to where I didn't expect that and to where I actually kind of felt emotional at times. But I will admit this, is this movie pretty generic for a film? Is this movie pretty generic as a superhero film? God, yes. But this movie, but the what carries this movie is the Blue Beetle character, his family, and his actual outfit. And I do think there are some pretty good fight scenes here and there. Now, again, I had no faith in this movie to where I actually love this movie so much that where I'm really hoping James Gunn will take these characters and his family into the DCU, and I was really hoping people would give this movie a chance because, like the other 3 DCEU movies last year, unfortunately, this movie flopped, and it's a shame too because this movie deserves so much more, and to where I really wish people gave it a chance. Now, I don't think this movie was going to be that one movie that saved the DCEU, but people didn't give it a chance and it flopped. Where I'm really hoping James Gunn will see the positive income on this movie and be like, you guys can come into my DCEU, it's fine. I'm really hoping that because I enjoy these characters so much. And number 4 is going to be Wonder Woman. Now, for a while, this actually was my number 1. But I watched a few of these movies, and I went, yeah, you're going to drop down a little bit. Now, this is a great superhero origin story. And what I also really like about this movie, too, is that it's actually directed by a woman to where you can actually see the woman's point of view, which I thought was a pretty cool thing. And if I'm not mistaken, this is actually the first DC movie directed by a woman, and probably the first superhero movie directed by a woman. Huh. Anyways, now Gal Gadot, I didn't think she was gonna be great in this movie. Even when I was a kid, when I watched Batman v Superman, I was like, I don't know if she's gonna be good as Wonder Woman. But thank the Lord. And this movie also basically just tells like a fish out of water story, like Thor, like how Thor in the first movie he leaves Asgard and he tries to learn the ways of Earth. This movie kind of does that with Wonder Woman, but to me it just does it better. And I love the action in this movie; it's absolutely fantastic. Like the No Man's Land scene, like that is cinema there. And this was the one movie that finally gave almost everybody hope for the DCEU. You got Man of Steel, which kind of came out with mixed reactions, but over time has become more popular. Then you got Batman v Superman, and like almost everybody, like literally almost everybody was saying the DCEU just needs to die. They should not make any more movies. This franchise just needs to be dead. Just kill it off now. And then this movie comes out, and then people go, you know what? Maybe this DCEU franchise will not be so bad. Maybe this will finally give us hope to show us that this actually has some pretty good movies. Look where that went 10 years later. Alright. Number 3 might get me in a little bit of trouble, but hey, it's in my top 3. Just be lucky made it in my top 3. Because my number 3 is going to be Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League. Now, I will even admit this, even if I didn't love this movie and this was still in like my middle part or even the bottom half of this ranking, I would still respect this movie that it even came out, that it even came to fruition to where I was even one of those crew that was like, I doubt that movie will ever come out. But I ate my words and this movie actually came out and I put it to the side for the longest time. And this was actually the first movie I watched of 2024, so good for me apparently. And it lived up to the hype to where this movie was really hyped up for me. Almost every critic on YouTube said that it was one of the best DCEU movies, some of the best movies out there, one of the best comic book movies ever made, Zack Snyder's best movies ever made, and all that. And I was like, I don't want to overhype myself, but thankfully, this movie lived up to the hype, but I don't think it's perfect. Now, my main issue with this movie is some of this movie is just setup. This movie is just complete setup for a part one and not part one, part two and part three. To where this movie does tell a story, but it kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger. It's like, oh, I got some more ideas for the Justice League, so just you wait. But this franchise got rebooted, so we may never see Zack Snyder's Justice League Part 2 and 3. And it's kind of upsetting too because I want to see more of Darkseid. I want to see where they can take this, especially at the very end of this movie. This movie does set up stuff, and it's like I want to see where this franchise could go. I want to see where a Justice League Part 2 and 3 could have gone. But I will admit that Netflix has come out and said that they are interested in buying the rights to the Snyderverse and continuing it. Zack Snyder himself even said that he would do it if they came to him about it. So if Netflix buys the rights to the Snyderverse and James Gunn lets Netflix do the Snyderverse, maybe you'll like this movie more, and maybe this movie would probably climb up more and I'll have more faith in it. Like, I kind of doubt it would ever happen, but I doubted this movie would ever come out, so you never know. And another thing I really liked about this movie was the cyborg subplot to where they announced a cyborg movie, but I did not have a lot of interest in it. But after watching this movie, his some of his storyline takes up most of the movie and has some of the most emotional stuff in it to where it's like I want to see a movie with that guy. That could have been a great movie. Like it's kind of upsetting that we never got that movie either because after this movie I'm like I wanted to see that cyborg movie. Like this guy's actually really cool. But you know, unfortunately we didn't get it. I think Stephen Wolf is a step up from the theatrical cut of the original movie because Steppenwolf in this movie is just pure gold. I love him in this movie compared to whatever the fuck we got him in the theatrical cut. And at number two is going to be James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. This is the sequel to Suicide Squad. Now, when this movie was first coming out, I had no faith in it whatsoever. I thought it wasn't going to be very good. I didn't really have much interest in the movie. But James Gunn's name did really catch my eye on it because, of course, of Guardians of the Galaxy and all that, and Super, which is another comic book movie he made. And I just didn't have a lot of interest in this movie until my dad and me just checked it out on Max. We didn't want to go out to the theater because we didn't think it would be very good. But we watched it, and I absolutely love this movie to where I honestly think that this is one of the best DC movies ever made, in my opinion, to where I'm glad we got that Peacemaker show because I love Peacemaker in this movie to where when I found out they made a TV show, I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to watch that. And I ended up watching it. Loved it. Cannot wait for season 2. And this is just one of the more entertaining movies of this universe to where it also is one of the first movies to flop in this universe and it doesn't deserve that because this is one of the best DCEU movies because now I think the reason that the movie did flop is because of well this is a sequel to Suicide Squad and that movie was poorly received and this movie DCEU people didn't really want to check it out and it was also during COVID. So there you go. And it's upsetting too because this is one of the more entertaining and one of the better DCEU movies out there. And it's a shame too because I would have really liked to see a sequel and I really wanted to see like another movie with Peacemaker and Bloodspot or is it Dead it's basically Deadshot, okay? It's basically Deadshot, okay? I don't know. It's a fun DCEU movie and it's a movie I can see myself rewatching a lot and I finally bought it on Blu-ray. I don't know why it took me so long. And at number one, my number one DCEU movie is Man of Steel. This is my favorite Superman movie. This is the movie that finally got me to love Superman. And this is the movie where I think Zack Snyder fully understood the character because I'm not the biggest fan of Superman. I do not like him whatsoever. I don't think he's the best superhero out there. I grew up as a Spider-Man and Batman guy. I did not really care for Superman because I think he's way overpowered for a superhero. But after this movie came out, I became a full Superman fan because after this movie, I was like, you know what? Superman's pretty cool. I really love this movie. I love Henry Cavill's performance as Superman because it's a shame that he kind of got ruined as a character. Like, this is just a near perfect movie for me. I absolutely adore Man of Steel. This is one of my favorite comic book movies ever made. This is my favorite Superman movie ever made, and it is my number one DCEU movie. That is it, everybody. That is my DCEU ranking. This video ended up being so much longer than I thought it was. My voice is very low, and it hurts, and I need some water. But thank you all so much for watching my video of all 16 DCEU movies ranking. This is me saying goodbye to the DCEU. Maybe we'll get it back someday, but I doubt it. But if you like this video, like it. If you loved it, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you will get notified for my latest videos. And of course, until my next video, I'll see you all next time.